Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our presentation on Silent Hill 2, an artistic journey into fear. We are very happy to be here this year. Obviously, we want to thank to Adobe Substance for an invitation and their hospitality during the event. We hope you will enjoy the presentation that we prepared for you today. Before we will go to presentation, let us quickly introduce ourselves. First, my name is Mateusz. Lenart. I'm creative director at Bluebird team. I've been in the game industry for almost 18 years now. I have my 10th anniversary of working on horror games and at Bluebird team this year, so it's a pretty special year for me. Through those years, I was working on almost all our major releases up to date, helping to bring the visions to life and shaping the artistic approach to our titles in general. During my free time, I'm a passionate artist, exploring various media, including traditional and digital painting, sculpting, comic book drawing, and creating 3D animated short films, which takes a lot of time. I'm also a huge cinephile and geek. So if you like to feel free to connect with me on social media. I'll be very happy to chat with you about art, games, and movies. To find me, you can use the QR code, and you can just Google my full name on the internet. And Pablo?
Oh, hello, my name is Pablo Poliakov. I'm a lead character artist at Bluebird team, and I joined a few years ago in the company to work on Silent Hill 2. I've been in the industry for over 16 years now, and I worked in several different projects in the past for different companies like Epic 2 with Bliss Game Studios, Mafia 3 for 2K and Hangar 13, and at Bohemia Interactive with Vigor and the latest Arma game. Other than doing some character art, as you can see there from my works, also a massive nerd, really into Warhammer figures and Gunpla as of recently, and quite into anime as well. So if you want to chat about any nerdy stuff, just hit me up anytime, really. I'm always glad to have a nice conversation. And yeah, you can see a QR code there for my art station, and that's it.
Okay, great. So now I want to share how we will go through this presentation today. So in the first part, I would talk a little bit about our company, then I would give you a short introduction for the game. We'll be talking about the general approach to remake and art directing, mostly focusing on the narrative behind the narrative part behind the visuals.
And I'll be talking about how to create an artistic vision for the character you work, in this case Pyramid Head, texturing the helmet, and also making the cloth, and a practical example also on his gloves. We'll go through the substance painter process for that.
Okay, great. So let's go through the company overview first pretty quickly. So Bluebird team was founded in 2008 in Krakow, Poland. Right now we have nearly 250 skilled professionals on board working on new horror titles. At the beginning, the company created games mostly as a work for hire. But in 2015, we've decided to focus on psychological horror genre, slowly building our visibility and experience in that area throughout the years. Few examples of the games that we created in that period are Layers of Fear, Observer, Blair Witch, or The Medium. With Silent Hill 2 Remake, we started a new chapter in Bluebird team history, going into survival horror genre, but obviously we are not forgetting about the psychological aspects of our game and stories. Another title created in that genre will be Chronos: The New Dawn, which is our new IP with the original IP with the release date being settled to this year. Yeah, but today we will be talking about Silent Hill 2. So the title, for those who don't know, is a psychological horror game infused with combat. Throughout the game, we are following James Sunderland on his journey to find his wife in a town called Silent Hill. The story is with us for the last 24 years, so I will not go through that in details. As you know, it's a remake of a famous game released in 2001 by Konami. So let's watch the cool launch trailer made by our marketing team to get into the mood of the presentation.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name. It's ridiculous. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. So then why am I looking for her?
You loved her, didn't you?
Me. You. We're all the same.
I'm not like you.
Are you afraid?
Run! I just want to get my Mary back.
You're Mary. Your own little Mary.
It doesn't matter if you're smart, dumb, ugly, pretty. It's all the same once you're dead. And a corpse can't laugh.
Stay with me. Don't leave me alone again. You're supposed to take care of me.
I know what you are. I know why I needed you. But it's all over now. I don't need you anymore. I'm ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the game received very well by the players, were received very well by the players and critics, with the final rating around 87%, which we are very happy about, obviously. The game was nominated for multiple awards and won several of them. At the end, we are very grateful for the support and growing community around the game. It's only two of us today, but the game was an effect of hard work of many talented people in our team and on Konami's side. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, as you can imagine at the beginning of the production. I think this image represents the state of our mind at the beginning of the production, at the state of my mind at the beginning of production. Even the haircut, I think, is pretty similar. So we've been dealing with the iconic game, beloved by millions of players with hundreds of theories and interpretations. And to be honest, we've been afraid that there might be no good way to create a remake for that game. But nevertheless, we started working on it and analyzing every single aspect of the original game. And we quickly realized that we are dealing with the memory of the game. And if we want to succeed, we need to bring this memory back to the players, but not by copying what was there, but by reimagining those things for the modern era. Step by step, we started to see the potential and places for improvement. And because of that, fear slowly turned into excitement. From the beginning, we knew that the story of this game is the most important aspect of it, and we didn't want to change it too much. At the same time, it was clear that it would be hard to present this story in modern era without changes of mechanics or combat. One of our first decisions was to change the camera to regular over-the-shoulder third-person perspective. And we knew that with that change, we will lose a certain style from the original game, but at the same time, we didn't want to bring back the feeling of nostalgia just by using archaic solutions and mechanics. At the end, this change allowed us to create a more personal connection with the game, and that was something that we really wanted to build upon. As we know, every change is leading to another changes, and that was exactly like that in this situation. We realized pretty quickly that when players can see more and have more control over the game, they will expect more from the experience. So that's why we introduced new gameplay mechanics to support wider approach to exploration. The ability to break windows and be able to explore the interiors of the city seemed like a natural progression that had to be done. It was not the only aspect of the game that had to be changed to support this more intimate approach. That's why we decided to introduce a physical map and in-game investigation to not drag the player from the naturalistic game view. We wanted the player to stay out from the inventory and any type of UI as much as it's physically possible throughout the game. It was a costly decision, obviously, from a production perspective, but it allowed us to create a feeling that we desired. It was quite a similar approach and similar process with the combat changes. We wanted to build upon the original ideas and designs. We wanted to remind people how cool those monsters were back in the day, even though right now they will not present expected level of complexity in terms of AI. But being inspired by it, we could use new perspective and possibilities to surprise the players with new ideas. For example, mannequin still refers to original in many ways, but right now they get an ability to hide from the players using environments around them. They will freeze there and wait for the player to attack, and they get like all of other like small adjustments that make them more interesting than it was in the original game. But there was a risk of losing specific feeling from the original game. It can be seen especially with the boss fights, which we needed to redesign completely. A good example is the Pyramid Head boss fight. We remembered being trapped with him in a tiny room with no place to hide, but it will not work with the new perspective and systems that we are creating. We needed to make the room bigger, which forced us to find new place for the fight, which naturally made the need for the Pyramid Head to be more aggressive and faster. This change also forced us to resign from the water staircase idea, which was like pretty memorable from the original game. So we've been losing something, but we are gaining something too. And we wanted to use that to our advantage. So breaking it down a little bit, new bigger environment allow us to show the power of the enemy with destructible objects around us. Symbolism of water was kept through rain effect, helping us to show the progress of the fight, which was a big problem in the game, in the original, in our version too, because as you know, Pyramid Head can't be defeated at this point of the playthrough, and we wanted to keep that. So the rain effect that is getting stronger and stronger during the fight, along with other small things that we did, allow us to show the players that they are progressing through this boss fight, even though it's not very visible on the enemy. At the end, we found a way to show the players that we are not forgetting about the source material, and we kept the staircase, but in a different place and different part of Blue Creek apartment. To do that, we introduced a feature called Glimpses from the Past that allow us to break the over-the-shoulder perspective in specific places of the game to show a straight reference to the original. It was kind of our way to communicate with longtime fans, our way to keep the memory of their beloved game and to show that even if we are changing something, we still deeply care. The part of the game that I'm proud the most is the approach to level design and general flow of the game. If you analyze this aspect of the game, it will show, in my opinion, how we've been able to find the right balance between keeping the source material and introducing new things for the players that can keep them interested, even the longtime fans of the series. People often say that we haven't changed much and that we took a very safe approach to the remake. And to be honest, I can't disagree more. But in a way, I'm happy about this, and I think it's our success that people think that. I like to think we are bringing back the memories for them. There are locations like Eastern South Wales, where the layout seems to be copied almost one-to-one. That was a conscious decision from our side, especially because the location at is present at the very beginning of the game. So we wanted the players to feel that they are at home again, entering Silent Hill after so many years. But the flow of the level is completely different and supports the exploration and non-linear gameplay of the remake, as I mentioned before. In the original game, you could take the radio, grab the key, and go straight to Woodside apartment. In the remake, we are forcing the player to explore the whole town, and we are using it to tell the personal story of James and Mary from the time before they met in the past. Another example could be the apartment building. Approach to this one was completely different. We needed to build the layout from scratch because the original composition wouldn't be possible for us with a new gameplay. So we changed it drastically, making sure that we will perceive memory of this place. So even though the building has a new structure and new flow and the flow is changing, we kept the things that were important and memorable for players, in my opinion. We wanted to remind the feeling of long corridors, closed doors, darkness, weirdness, even color schemes of corridors and specific places were references to the original game. Our goal was to get the reaction from the players that this location is how they remembered it from the past. And I hope we succeeded with that. We treated the puzzles in a quite similar fashion. We've been inspired by the original ideas, expanding on their themes and meanings. You will still be able to recognize coin puzzle or clock puzzle in those locations, even if you are not realizing that the places are changed and mechanics are very, very different right now. For example, clock puzzle in the new version is placed in Otherworld, Blue Creek apartment. The whole level progression is built around it, and we are expanding the theme of passing time that in my opinion, fits perfectly to the story that we are talking about James at this point. For comparison, in the original game, it was simple, self-contained puzzle allowing us to enter the blocked room. So, in a nutshell, it's all about playing with the player's expectations and memories of the places and events. We kept all the memorable moments in Woodside apartment, so you will meet Eddie, you will visit the room with the flashlight hanging on Mary's dress, and you will pick up the gun from the shopping cart once again. One of my favorite scenes from the original was one where James crosses from one building to another. It's a very iconic scene. I think it was also used in one of the movies. But in our version, this is also the first time he steps into the otherworld, which for us seems like a good adjustment that works symbolically and also improves the flow and pacing of the game. Last but not least, the place where it happens is our version of Mary and James' apartment, and James crossing from good-looking room to its mirrored, twisted, and rotten version shows the backstory of Mary's illness beginning to impact their lives. So you can see how it kind of worked for us. We were using the existing material, trying to understand what it means and what impact it had, and try to reshape and expand it to the remake, for the remake. In the game like Silent Hill 2, the importance of such details is huge. So the story is the most important aspect of the game, as I've mentioned before, and everything from the gameplay mechanics, cutscenes, and to art directing should support it. Our approach to art presented the same attitude that I explained before several times with other mechanics. Some places received just a visual polish, while others were significantly reorganized and changed. Example of the iconic place from the original game that we wanted to recreate as faithful as possible was observation deck at the beginning of the game. At the same time, some locations like Woodside apartment didn't feel right, especially with over-the-shoulder camera perspective right now. We wanted to make the game believable visually, so we chose more realistic references from the American architecture and used them to see the idea of the building we believed original creators had in mind. Of course, one of the importance of art is to create deep atmosphere. We wanted to force the players to feel specific emotions through colors, tone, and compositions. For example, on the Silent Hill streets, we are using all those tools to bring the feeling of loneliness, confusion, sadness. At the same time, we used a completely different approach in Heaven's Night. This location will represent themes like temptation or lust. It's not an accident that you will hardly find those colors in any other part of the game. Otherworld sections also get its own visual direction to represent even stronger emotions like fear, anger, and disgust. But in the game like Silent Hill, it's not enough, is it? Good environment storytelling expands the narrative in a way that people start to analyze everything they see. One of the examples might be hospital section, where we are telling the story about 3 patients and the director. In the Fogworld section, we operate within the bounds of realism. We are building the story through notes, small visual hints, and general atmosphere. In Otherworld, we have the opportunity to present the same themes in much stronger and more direct way. Visually, Otherworld design in Silent Hill 2 is deeply connected to Mary's illness, as we know, filtered by James' emotions, memories, and guilt. He watched Mary being consumed by her sickness, and now Silent Hill drags him into nightmare using the same images in a twisted form. Usage of dirt sheets, rust, and layered approach to the environment is obviously very, very intended. The monsters in Silent Hill 2 also carries deep symbolic meaning. They are reflecting not only Mary's illness, but also James's own frustrations. I don't want to go deep into this topic because the internet is already full of theories and myths about that. And personally, I think it's also good to keep some things unexplained. What I want to express, though, is that all those narrative elements, all those things need to be used in the game like Silent Hill to create art directing that will be original, meaningful, and will enrich the game. So to sum it up, what was important for us during the production process is how we can use modern technology to expand on those ideas and themes. It is strongly visible on characters and monsters in the game. We wanted to make the characters and emotions to feel as real as it is physically possible. You can see it in details like Angela's bitten fingernails or the fresh mark on James' finger, where we can clearly see that his ring was recently removed, and probably not 3 years ago, as the game suggests. We took every opportunity to enrich the story, ensuring that no colors, no details, or objects in the game are used randomly. And to bring all of those details to life, we are using powerful tools like Adobe Substance Painter. And that's the Pablo's part. Smooth.
So let's talk about how we made Pyramid Head. And how do you actually even approach such a task? Where do you actually come from? In my opinion, the most important step of such a process is the very first one you take, which is creating a vision for the character. But what is a vision even? And how do you go about that? Well, let's talk about it. So the first thing we're going to see here, we have the concept art, obviously, made by Masahiro Ito, was the main guidance for this character. However, we also have the original character from the PlayStation 2 release from 2001. So we want to actually focus on the general idea of, of the general idea and the composition of the character first. And we want to look at the general aspects of it. We have a very obvious red helmet here, and we have this kind of desaturated body with values that push everything towards the top, and generally like a triangular figure. So this kind of general approach is kind of the very first thing you want to focus on. Of course, we also have to look at the general themes and symbology, which, let's be honest, there has an infinite amount of material online about it. Let's not go too deep into that. But two kind of visual aspects that we use here quite heavily are the corrupted element of the rust from the otherworld and the sickly aspect of the dirt, expressed on his clothing and body. We, of course, need to also study the original material. In contrast with the current concept art and vice versa, it's important to identify elements that are also present in the original that maybe you can use to enhance the current version of the game. So, for example, we can see that there are these kind of really dark stains in the original one that kind of almost pitch black that we thought that looks quite interesting and gives us almost this PlayStation 2 feel to it, and with a bit of color distortion around them towards orange and red colors. So that's something we took note and went over. It's very important also to identify things that not only what the character actually is, but what it isn't. When you're working on such an iconic character like Pyramid Head, there has been countless of interpretations, both like official and fan art, and they can be like an absolutely great inspiration. However, some visual elements can be added there that not necessarily go back to the source that you're actually taking from. For example, there's one model I saw online that had a Pyramid Head with flesh coming from the bottom of the helmet that looked really cool. However, that's nowhere to be seen in the original, so we kind of tried to restrain from adding too many of these elements and be more faithful to the original vision and to the vision that Masahiro Ito provided us with his concept art. So the thing that we want to focus on now, we want to make a list of objectives and kind of targets that we have to hit. So we have the red head. We have the body with its own muted colors. We have the dirt that we want to make it pitch black like the original with this kind of color distortion. And we're also going to add one more target here. We wanted to make the head, which is not completely matte, like the Rust usually tends to be, but with some shiny elements so it can interact well with the game's lighting and create more visual interest. So we start asking questions. We need to identify basically what are things actually made of. This will be, of course, super important for us to identify what materials to use in Substance, but also to guide our general vision while creating the character. You want to interact with your concept artists and your art directors to figure out what is what. I would actually like to take a moment here to make a shout out to Mateusz Lenart here, Masahiro Ito, and our concept artists Aneta Bielas and Piotr Książlewski for the support on these characters. It would be impossible to have done it without them, and also the rest of the team at Bloober that was helping there. But you don't always get the answers that you actually want. Many things will be not clear completely. So you have to take some creative choices yourself. The choices of these materials are not just for visual appeal, they have to be thematically fitting. One of the ideas, for example, that I was playing around at the beginning is that in order to create this kind of jagged profile on the characters, like, hey, maybe let's use barnacles. It's using shapes, right? Like it's very similar to a sea wreck. However, this actually added a connotation of maritime or like oceanic aspect to it, which was not really desired. It adds an element to the story that's not in the original and not the direction we want to go for. So because there's no seas nearby Silent Hill, it's mostly actually a lake. So we stripped this idea down and instead focused on finding other ways to express this. There were some parts that were not super clear at the beginning, like this part here that marked. Initially, I thought it was metal, but Masahiro came us and told us that it's actually leather, so had to redo that. But that shaped a lot the vision of the character later. So defining these materials is important not just for the visual part of the character and for yourself, but it's also for other departments. For example, the audio team actually can be very benefited by knowing what a character is made of because they can make creative choices early in production, so they can do a more interesting soundscape. Or VFX knows how to interact better with the material by making it like wet in a specific way or having some effects applied to the character. So the next thing, and I always recommend people to spend a good time on this, is to start gathering references. There's like a treasure trove of information, both in real life and just finding online. I usually recommend for people to actually look at real photos if possible, and not just other works, although that can be very helpful. And you want to focus on references that actually are supporting the vision you're trying to achieve. For example, here, we have this one that we noticed like, hey, Rust can actually behave almost like a tree bark. It has this kind of layering effect that we can play around with. We have these very organic shapes that are like heavily distorting metal, jagged edges. And what was very interesting, and this is what allowed us to achieve the objective we said before, of having some shiny elements contrasting with matte elements, painted metal that was at some point new but then rusted off, still has a layer of paint that shines through, but also heavy contrasts with these peeled off sections of matte rust. So we have now some good references. Another thing that is very important to consider is that your shape is actually defining the material. It's not just about assigning a preset and just calling it a day. If you want to make a leather boot, you should look into how the leather is actually shaped. It will help massively to sell the feeling and the idea of the character. Clothing effects are actually one of the most common things to study, but because most characters usually have some sort of clothing, but it applies to everything, like any kind of material you can think of. So identify your primary shapes, and like some secondary, you want to look at how the material bends, how borders work. Don't go too much into detail, however, because this research will help you to prepare the work for texturing later. Of which here we have the high poly mesh. And this is the application of the point we just mentioned. You are trying to express your material with 3D shapes as much as you can. You've tried to focus on detailing elements that are going to be shaping the profile of it more than anything else. That's kind of the general rule of thumb I'm using. Like, it breaks profile, it gets sculpted. But not everything needs to be actually sculpted. Like, a lot of things are much easier to do in Substance because you have like a great material library that we'll be using extensively in a second. And it's you can just be more effective by combining either the elements that you sculpt in a more simple manner with the normal maps from Substance, or just relying completely on the software later. It's very common also to come back to the high poly mesh during the texturing stage just to adjust some level, like some details. For example, I had some memory folding that I added later because it combined very well with the material preset I was using in Substance. And also quite important is to set up your export settings. Like, this is something that if you have a technical artist with you, talk to them so they can help you to how to pack your channels. But doing this at the beginning of production especially is quite important because it would just make the whole process more smooth. In our case, we actually didn't use the ambient occlusion that comes with Substance by default. In the export settings, we are using a custom channel for this because we wanted to be able to repaint it by hand just to fix some baking mistakes, or to kind of edit the look of the material, because our shader also overrides the diffuse map and the specularity in engine to kind of punch out the details a bit further than you usually get by default. One more thing I want to strongly recommend to everyone is that when you're doing your texturing, is set up a neutral lighting scene in Unreal or whatever engine you work with. And it doesn't have to look fancy. It can be very simple, just like some gray background. And I cannot stress this enough, purely no colors on the lights, like pure white, because sadly this is something I've seen quite often, that there's some colors in there, it tints the whole thing, and then your texturing is just not accurate. However, this is just a baseline, because the most important part is you're making a game, so you need to check it in game. Sounds obvious, but if this is like your most important target. You need to check that your character actually looks like it belongs into the environments it has to be set in, that you have to test it in the levels. If it appears in a cutscene, definitely collaborate with your cinematic team and your lighting team, because you'll be going back and forth between their work and your work, trying to adjust to find like this perfect shot at the end. Also test it in gameplay as much as you can, like not just putting the character in the scene, but actually see how it reacts to the player and to any dynamic lighting that you may have there. General rule of thumb, if you have to ask yourself, am I testing this enough? Answer is probably no. So just play more. So yeah, for example, in our case, we actually found out that because our entire game, especially the sections with pyramid appears, have a flashlight present. The flashlight was actually burning a lot of the characters that had too many like white colors and like very bright, so we had to lower all the intensity of the diffusers down so it would not burn on the screen. This was only visible when you actually were in gameplay, because on your test scene it looked pretty nice. So yeah, pretty important. So let's start texturing. And first thing we do, we're going to just put anything. Like really, just put any material, start with something. I have this just rusty metal there that I took from the asset library. Basically everything except one material you're going to see here comes from the Substance asset library. It's an amazing resource I recommend everyone to get familiar with. And yeah, in this case I just used only for normal variation. The next one is the paint that we talked before. So I was trying to look into what is the best way to do this crack in paint, and I happened to stumble upon this material, which was cracked lime. It was like, had a slider for it to just crack it more and less, and it was like, you know what, this is perfect. I was almost going back to ZBrush before that and just to sculpt it. This saved a bunch of time. I just made like 3 or 4 stacks of it with different levels of crackling and mask off by hand to just leave in the parts when I actually want to have some crackling in. Then we bring some contrast into this thing. We try to make it like way more punchy by adding this kind of heavy rust thing. I used a generator to help the distribution initially, but it wasn't really that important in this case, actually, I have to say, because mostly I just left with a grunge. So you can also use just a grunge, but yeah, a generator, when you're using, I would like to recommend that don't just leave the default result out of it. Add a mask layer on top of that and paint in and out sections that kind of make it look a bit artificial. The kind of pure generator look can be spotted after some time when you're getting used to it, so just doing this painting layer can really help to settle like a more natural feel to your texture. And well, I think some variants after this was done like 2 different layers. As we said before, we observed that there's this kind of tree bark almost looking one, so we added these darker layers underneath, and then this yellow layer on top that was added to kind of create this sort of edge highlight, so there's a bit more readability into a rust. Then there's another layer on top of that. This just is a grime that goes towards the bottom, and it's serving mostly kind of a compositional tool to kind of guide the eye from the bottom towards the top by creating a visual gradient. And on top of that, there's also like this bright orange cavity mask applied on some of the holes just to kind of punch them a bit more. And it's an element that was also present in the references that we were studying before. Then we come to this big dark stain. This is kind of our hero stain. So to be honest, this is the one part I spent most time on this texture, because this is actually kind of the face of the character, if you think about it. It's designed to be heavily contrasted with the shiny paint that we have underneath. And it went through multiple iterations back and forth between the engine, texturing software, painter, engine. There's no trick to this one, however. I'm sorry to tell you, it's just painting, like really just paint. There's also a metal edge detection filter added to like a metallic layer, which is mostly painted out. They just left on the very, very edges to kind of punch the look a little bit more. And our final touch is just some red tint and some value adjustment to kind of bring down the colors and kind of set the right tone. And here we have the result. And we can also check a turnaround. Yeah, you can see that the paint that we talked before, like it's there's like showing up in certain angles. So yeah, that is the head. Let's move on to the body. So, we noticed that a lot of the characters in this game, mostly the bosses, had this material that we kind of named the potato sack. I mean, if you look at Flesh Lips over there, made by Katarzyna Stanisz, it literally is a potato sack with body parts. Like, really. And yeah, we also have the Mandarin by Łukasz Żukowski, and that also shares this material across several other characters as well. So it's a good idea to actually find these recurring visual themes in your game and just try to share the same base for them. We found this linen in the library and said, you know what, we're going to use it basically everywhere, but not using exactly the same type of coloration and patterning. So there's a bit of distinction doesn't look like it's just copy-pasting your materials. When working with dirty materials, something I really like to do is just start with a base layer of grime. It needs to be like fairly subtle. The idea is that it kind of creates mostly like a similar value and hue and doesn't overpower any of the work you do later. So it's mostly like a background and, like, again, very subtle. This is done by using fill layers with some simple colors and using the grunge masks that you can find also in Substance. Like there's like a ton of them. Just play around and just be sure that you are not making the thing too noisy or too overbearing. However, by contrast, we now go to the really big stain we have. Similar to how we had on the helmet before, we have this hero stain. We also identified another element, well, actually more of came up with it because during development we were trying to have the otherworld creatures share some visual theme. We wanted to have this kind of very sickly, kind of oily look to them. They kind of represent sickness, as mentioned before. And they also have a mechanical reason, like darker creatures usually read as like a bit more elite, and they react to the flashlight because they're shiny. So Katarzyna Stanisz, my colleague, made this lying figure character before that had this material applied for the first time. And what we did is that we just saved the stack of materials into a smart material that can be shared across the entire project, and we can reuse this in a more effective manner. By the way, this material is done by just using the same method as before. It's just grunge layers stacked on top of each other, this time also with like a flow map of water, and just very shiny. So basically, it also helped us to sell this dark idea from before that we wanted to do for the stains. Because if you do dark and matte, usually lighting in the game actually will show it more like a washed out gray. So having something dark and shiny actually helps to help out with this contrast. So again, this was a case of painting. It does help, however, to think about what kind of material you actually are working on and what is the interaction between them. So in this case, we have a cloth with a liquid that's flowing over it slowly. Cloth usually would tend to absorb a little bit of the material, so it was painted into two different stages. We have the kind of blurry absorption part of the material, and then we have a sharper aspect of it that kind of is more recent flow and splattering painted into it. Spend a good time in the composition because, for example, this kind of underneath area that we have right here, this actually is kind of a shadow of the helmet. You don't usually see it directly in the game that much, only when the character turns a bit, but it still creates a very important negative space right below that needs to be respected. So we put the kind of concentration at the bottom, but also we have this heavy shadow flow added to the character. After this, we just added more iterations on that. We added this general like reddish, half wet, half roughness layer that kind of represents this kind of more drying and more spreading of this liquid throughout the material. And we also did a copy of the main stain that we had before using an anchor point and just did a red layer with some some blur that actually will do this kind of transition of color from black into the kind of colors of red and orange that we were identifying before in our vision. So yeah, one point also to notice here, yes, these stains are actually a bit darker than are recommended usually by PBR balancing. This was done intentionally in this case because we want to exaggerate this feel. So it was balanced by testing in the engine to find the breaking point when it actually starts looking just broken. And we just adjusted until we had this kind of a bit darker than usual, but stylistically fitting idea for the texture. And well, further polishing, then, this repeats exactly the same steps as we had before, just trying to focus mostly on the negative space between the stains that we had before already. It's just, again, extension of the same process, and you just want to go back and forth. And again, concept art can help here as well. Well, we have the final look of the texture for the apron here. Now, let's talk about the last example that we have, which is the gloves. So this was actually a very fun material to do. That's why I wanted to share it here at the end. They're very specific, the gloves of this character. There's kind of this weird like latex hand that is actually a normal hand, but it has 3 fingers fused in there. And our concept artist, Aneta Vielas, took a picture of her hand, just pushed through some white latex. And I was like, that is actually quite an interesting idea. However, of course, making this with actual shading in 3D wouldn't be very practical. So we decided to, let's just fake it. So let's study it for a second. What actually makes this effect work? So we have these kind of almost moisture-looking contact points on the skin, and then we have kind of a gradient of the skin fading out with the plastic. So with that in mind, we can actually look into how to make it. First is that I modeled this glove based on a 3D scan of a hand I already had. It was already textured, and it had a high poly mesh for it. So I already had a base to start off and kind of saved a bunch of time. And I just baked the diffuse map into the glove directly. Like, sure, there are some artifacting here, but it doesn't matter because we're going to paint out all of this in our next step. We have this starting point, and we just divide the whole thing into 2 separate masks. One that has this moisture-inspired shades that has a sharpened filter on top just to really punch up the look. And then we have another layer which has this diffused aspect that kind of brings a bit of the fading. It's just painting out the spaces between the fingers, and also everything that's a fold that's separated from the surface also gets maxed out. And as a kind of extra touch, I also baked a cavity map that I noticed on the reference that they are like the most extreme parts on the knuckles that have deeper skin also are not filled by the plastic. So we take the cavity map, just leave it masked out on these knuckles here, and this kind of gives us a pretty decent illusion of skin under plastic. So from this point on, it really is just iterating exactly the same steps as before, with one difference that it's everything in like half opacity, and we are like using like only the diffuse map for this. There's no normal or no roughness because the latex on top of it actually takes priority. And to kind of leave the final effect for this. We just add a few stains on top, just very subtle. You really don't want to overdo the dirt on top because you still want to see the one at the bottom. But it still helps to kind of sell the idea of like layering of materials. And on top of that, then I painted some of the kind of otherworld black goo that we have just kind of flowing over because I wanted to create this feeling of like, yeah, he put his glove on top of a very dirty hand, it's just overflowing. It's weird as hell, but it fits the character. So yeah, that basically brings us to the final render. And we have also here our turnaround for the final result. And, well, yeah, I hope the character speaks for himself, even though he doesn't speak usually. So, yeah, time for questions, I guess.
Good.
Yeah. Yours was.
Yeah, I'm great with time.
Yeah.
Of course, of course.
Okay, everybody, we're going to do the Q&A section, and I think there are mics like in each of these aisles. It's really hard to see because of the glare, so I can't tell if anybody's lining up yet. Can you see? Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
All right, so you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you for the talk. My question was, what was the most challenging part of making Pyramid Head?
Okay, so the question was, what is the most challenging part of making Pyramid Head?
Well, I'll be honest, it was me being very nervous about not screwing this up, because goddamn the pressure. But yeah, I would say it was mostly coming up with a shape for the head and actually making it work with the texture in a way that felt natural.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, next question.
Hello. Sorry, amazing work on the characters. I just wanted to know, working with such a challenging character design with a whole helmet and big apron, did you have to work with other teams early on to block out the character?
So the question was, did you guys have to work with other teams to help block out the characters?
Block out.
Yeah, block out, that's what you said, right?
Yeah, like a block out, like a test mesh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so early on in production, we did collaborate with several studios, and we did, in fact, have outsourcing teams helping with characters as well. The earliest blocking out was actually done internally, just creating some quick proxies, but we did new iterations with external teams as well during production.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. I think we'll go on this side here.
That was this side.
Or,
yeah, we already did on this.
Oh, this side here?
What is the biggest difference or challenge in working on an existing IP like Silent Hill versus an original IP developed by your own studio?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, sorry, I have to repeat the question, so it's kind of weird, I know. But the biggest challenge between working on something like Silent Hill, like an established IP versus an original IP?
Yeah, I think the challenges are different, but you know, like there are different challenges if you are doing your own IP or you are, you know, based on someone else. Like, and both have some things to be considered. With making someone else IP, I think that the biggest challenge is that it's a little bit like Pablo said. You don't want to mess it up, right? Especially IP like Silent Hill 2 is something that you have like this pressure on your shoulder that there are some things that were made by the original creators. At the same time, especially with the game like Silent Hill, you also know that there are so many theories that not necessarily are true, but you need to respect them because they are in the general knowledge of the fans that it is exactly what was there. So it is like the acting, like we need to balance it a little bit, especially in terms of storytelling. So sometimes, even though if we, for example, like have the information from the original creators that it was not necessarily true, we sometimes are hiding like some of those information in the notes, somewhere in the environmental storytelling to kind of, you know, blink an eye to those fans that we understand and we remember that. But so yeah, I think like the biggest challenge and the biggest afraid is to try to know everything or be sure that what we are doing is fitting into the franchise. So I think that was the biggest challenge for me, at least.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think maybe we're on this side.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for the talk. I was going to ask, for both general design and character design, what was the most drastic change that you made, and how did you justify it while also keeping it in the spirit of the original?
Okay, so the question was around character design and what was the most, I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
The most drastic change that you made, and also general design as well.
Yeah, the most drastic change you made, but also with general designs as well.
Okay, I can take the general design part, I guess. Yeah, so it's, you know, there was many, I would say drastic changes, I don't know, but if I would need to say one, you know, like the biggest change is it was probably Western South Wales and the flow of the game in this part, because as you probably know, if you play the game, like this part is completely different. Like in comparison to the Eastern South Wales that I show in the presentation, that was like pretty much one-to-one. Western South Wales was like pretty much different, and the flow was different, and the layout of location was different, because we wanted to take a little bit more time with Maria in that place. We also and we needed to extend this this region and create the flow a little bit different to have a chance to talk to her, to have a chance to flesh out this character a little bit more. So instead of going straight into bowling alley and then to the Heaven's Night, into the hospital, we explored like completely different area of the space, and we created like completely new region. We changed the place of the Heaven's Night. We also replaced the bowling alley, which with that layout in that composition will not work. We added new location, which is this Lady of the Light, and the cinema. So that probably was the biggest change in the general design. And but like I said, it allowed us to flesh out Maria like much more, to get much more personal to this character, and to have like more room to explore these things. But that were like pretty big changes in comparison to the original. What was also important was the general flow of the game, because in the original game there was a little bit problem with the setting the goals for the players, because in the Rosewater Park we already knew that we need to go to the hotel, and in our version it was so long goal for the players that they always forget what they need to do. So we wanted to change that. So in our version, the goal was something that Maria tells us, and that makes sense because she don't want us to actually go to our final destination. So she drags us into this new location, which is the Lady of the Light place. So I could talk about it like half an hour, but yeah, basically, I think with the general design, that was the biggest change, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you all very much, and I'm sorry we don't have any more time for questions. But if you guys, if we go on out, I think that you guys can answer some more questions outside. But thank you all very much for attending this amazing talk. We really appreciate it.